Hello.
What's going on?
I'm glad that's over with.
Okay.
For our members, services like this. So we'll do our best to clean things up and make things better as we go along. But here again, excited to share with you a program that we deliver here in Missouri called Psychological Capital Development. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Let me introduce myself to you folks, and I will get that going. And that's me. That's the guy on the left there. Looks like he's about half asleep. That's me, and the good-looking guy on the right side of your screen is Michael Jones, who is our Iactp Association Services Manager. And most importantly for today's use is he is the producer of this session. So Michael will be helping us and watching the chat box and helping guide us through all these things that we are doing today. The majority of today is going to be me talking to you. I know you're sad about that, but that's probably what we're going to hear the most based on the audio issues that we're having. But I also very much want to hear from you folks in the chat box as well. So if you have chat, if you have questions, if you have things that you want to add, please chat them in and we will get to them as quickly as we possibly can. So that's me, that's Michael. We're here to serve you for the next hour or so. So let's talk about just a few ground rules, and we'll play with these as we go along. If you haven't done this already, and one of the things myself and a few other participants were talking about as you came on today is oftentimes we don't treat these webinars, these virtual instructor-led trainings as seriously as we do classroom training. We really want to start trying to do that and start promoting that as much as we can. So please turn off your email and instant messages, clear distractions away from your training area, just like you would in a regular classroom. And that way we can have a good training environment, and that way we can really communicate with one another. Please participate. And as I said earlier, we're not going to have a whole lot of audio stuff going on until we can get this audio problem fixed. But please be participate and prepare to be called on by name. And also, chat. That's probably the biggest function, okay, that we can use to actually communicate. Also, send us a chat or type in the letter Q, as Michael just typed that in the chat box over there if you want to ask a question. So type that in. That'd be the easiest way for us to get to your questions. There is no hand-raising function in this GoToMeeting platform that we're using right now. Be patient waiting for us to respond. We'll respond to your chats as soon as possible. If you leave the program, have to go somewhere, send us a chat, let us know when you return. And don't put your phone on hold when you leave. Well, actually, we got the audio muted right now, so that's not really a big deal. We may try to turn the audio back on in just a little bit and see if it works, but I don't know. May just work with the chat function right now. So what I want you to do, and I will call on you folks as you type things in the chat box. I really want to know these three questions from you folks: who you are, where you're from, and your expectations. And let's start. Just start putting things in the chat box, if you would, please. And what your expectations are. Okay, so Michael just unmuted some folks, right, Michael? So let's see if this audio thing is going to work. So I'm going to start at the very top. Stuart Baumgardner from North Dakota, sir. I already said the first two questions. So what are your expectations for today?
My expectations are to be wowed by Jim Wiseman.
Man, you're off to a great start then, aren't you?
Always am, Jim.
Thanks, Stuart. I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. Any other expectations?
Not off the top of my head.
All right, thank you. Going right down my list, Tammy Brammer. Tammy, good morning to you. Are you with us? All right. Let's continue to go down. How about Alicia Creighton? Alicia, you with us? Striking out. How about Kat Hurt from Seattle? Kat, you with us?
Yes, I just typed a response, but I'm from Washington Department of Corrections and hoping to see how I can get information that'll help with my team and maybe learning.
Thank you very much, Katerina. I appreciate that. Thank you. It's good talking to you this morning. Rosalie from Maine, I see you type some things in. Anything you want to add or share?
I don't think so. Good afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, Rosalie. Appreciate it. Are you? All right, Michael, go ahead and mute us again, if you would, please. Michael's going to mute us again. I we work through all these issues with these technical issues with GoToMeeting. Let's get started with the program and the objective for today. Here's the objective that I have for you folks today, and I want to share with you that this is a program that we actually use here in Missouri. So what I really want to, and we actually adopted it from the National Institute of Corrections, and it's based on some theory that we're going to talk about here in just a moment. Really what I want to do today is assist all of you in developing psychological capital and also devising strategies to develop other psychological capital. So really not only in yourself, but also psychological capital for others. And then also, probably the most important thing that I'd like to share with you today is really some psychological capital, or PsyCap as we call it for short, delivery tips that I can give to you that may be useful for you. Welcome, Randy Perdue. Welcome aboard. So we've got everybody muted right now, Randy. So please chat in and share us your thoughts or anything that you have as we go along. Good to have you on board. I'll try to recognize folks as they sign on. So that's our objective today. The first thing, there are really four types of capital that we talk about, and as we begin the session, we identify those types of capital. I think everyone's probably familiar with economic capital. That really is what we have, the things we possess, the money, the property, things like that. The second type of capital is human capital, and it's really what you know, the degrees you have, the education you have, things like that. And the third type of capital is social capital, and that's who you know, the networks you have, things like that. And really, throughout history, these three types of capital are really the main themes of what organizations have really focused on with their people. And they've really left out this fourth type of capital that we're going to talk about today, which is psychological capital. And it really is, it's more about who we are, and not even so much who we are, but who we can become. And that's one of the cool things about this program, is it really focuses on ourselves, our employees, and not just who we are, but also the most important thing, I think, is who we can become. So continuing on, what really is psychological capital? It's really your positive psychological state of development as characterized by this acronym HERO. And we'll talk about this acronym throughout the course today. And it's something during that three-part webinar series that I'm going to share with you today. It's something we focus on. We talk about these four components and how we can build these four components in our employees. They are hope, efficacy, resiliency, and optimism. And we'll talk about those four components once again as we go on today. So the theme surrounding PsyCap is that if you have high levels of these four components, of these positive components that we term HERO, then you're probably going to be more, you're going to perform better, and you're going to be more successful both at home and at work, which if you're successful away from the job, you're probably going to be successful at work as well. A few more things about PsyCap. It really does make a large part input into who you are, what you believe you can do, what you do, and who you can become. And here again, the who you can become is really an important aspect of this program. And it's theory and research based, and it's really based on the theories of Dr. Fred Luthans. And if you haven't read his books, he wrote a book titled Psychological Capital, Developing the Human Competitive Edge back in 2011. And then he just recently published, I say recently, but I think back in 2016 or 15, he recently published another book titled Iactp and Beyond, Psychological Capital and Beyond. And if you haven't read those books, I would encourage you to read those. That's the foundation of this program. And to give you also a little background, the National Institute of Corrections, myself and Dr. John Eggers, who worked for the National Institute of Corrections, with the permission of Dr. Luthans, piloted a program for NIC, and we delivered it in several different states and different jurisdictions, and we did a pilot program here in Missouri. And what I have done here in Missouri is actually taken some of that and developed our very own psychological capital program. So that's a brief history of Iactp that I'm going to talk to you about today. It's great stuff. It really is. And as I mentioned here, it's theory and research based, and it's stuff that we can continue to expand on and make even better. So let's talk about the very first component of Iactp, and we'll talk about these four just real briefly. The first one is hope, and the definition of hope as defined by psychological capital is persevering towards goals and when necessary redirecting paths to goals in order to succeed. Hope is not just, and this is when I was introduced to psychological capital, it's not just hoping things go okay. Hope is actually having a plan. You have goals, you persevere towards those goals. So briefly, that's the first component. Second component, efficacy, self-efficacy, or the confidence to take on and have that necessary effort to succeed at challenging tasks that we have in corrections. So that's efficacy. The third component of HERO, the acronym we use, is resiliency. And resiliency is briefly defined as the capacity to rebound or bounce back from adversity, conflict, failure, or use some of the things about resiliency that I hadn't thought about until I really dove into psychological capital. Even we have to be resilient when we're promoted and when we have increased responsibility, or those positive things happen as well. The fourth component of psychological capital, making a positive attribution and expectation about succeeding now and in the future. So those are the four components of psychological capital. Anybody have any questions on those four components or thoughts before we move on? I'm not seeing anything in the chat box. We still have you muted due to some technical difficulties, so apologize for that, but please feel free to chat questions in the box. Let's talk about these four components a little more in detail. First of all, hope, and we term this the will and the way. It is really a positive motivational state that is based on an interactivity derived sense of successful, and really, as I said earlier, hope is not just hoping that everything goes okay. We have to have goals. We have to create goals. And really, two of the most important things that we have to have are willpower and way power. Willpower and way power. And we're going to talk about those two things pretty much in depth. And here's a question I want to ask you folks, and something we throw out during our three-part webinar series that we do. How do you think, and I'd like to hear some chats, to have you folks chat in some comments. How can goal creation, how can that assist correctional staff with their day-to-day operations? What do you think? Susan, I really like your comment on hope, and it really is a central theme to this, because hope and goal creation is really the central aspect of developing positive psychological capital. That's a great comment. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts on how goal creation can assist correctional staff with their day-to-day operations? If we don't have goals, folks, if we don't have things that we want to achieve, things probably aren't going to go that well for us. And that's one of the aspects, one of the things that we really focus on throughout the course of this training. So, and we'll talk about how we do that in some activities that we've developed a little bit later. Once again, we're not going to do a lot of those activities today based on time, and we're not doing the three-part webinar, but we'll talk about those as we go along. First, let's discuss willpower. as I said, there are really two aspects to hope, and there's willpower and way power. Willpower, as it says on your screen, really focuses on setting realistic, but those challenging goals and expectations, and then reaching those through that self-directed determination. So that's really about setting those goals. And here's another question for you. I'm going to ask and see if I can get some more input in the chat box. What examples of willpower can you come up with? What examples of having really good, strong, have you seen corrections professionals actually use willpower? And as I'm waiting for some chats to come in, what I'd like to hear from you is, and I'd like you to think about, is really this is about having that intrinsic motivation to succeed and get things accomplished. And that's one of the things we try to instill in our staff throughout this training, is that we want them to actually, as we think about intrinsic motivation, we think about metacognition, or thinking about thinking. You know, how do we think about what we're going to do, and then also the emotions that are surrounding that, and then also the behaviors that come out from that. So I want you to think about willpower and instilling in our staff the ability to set those realistic but challenging goals. I think all too often in corrections we don't do that. So willpower is very, very important. And the second aspect of hope, second main theme to it, is way power. And once again, this was really kind of an epiphany for me when I first got introduced to psychological capital. I thought about hope as being, wow, I hope everything. I mean, I didn't really think of it as being very specific and challenging, that you really had to set specific goals. I never really thought about hope in that way, in that manner. So the willpower is that intrinsic motivation. You got to set those goals, and then the way power is, if your path's blocked, are you able to get to generate an alternative path? Do you proactively determine the ways to accomplish your goals? Did you say, hey, if this doesn't happen the way I want it to happen, what else can I do? And then also, we need to ask ourselves these questions using these psychological capital, this positive psychological capital. Do we have strengths to draw from to actually manage these weaknesses and vulnerabilities? And here again, I'm going to ask another question of you folks. Now, I'd like to get some chat over here. Chat box is kind of barren in the last few minutes. I'd really like to generate some discussion. What examples of way power can you come up with? And Ken Sturdy, I'm answering your question. Yes, absolutely. The slideshow will be available. Thank you, Susan. You're absolutely right. The goal has to be more than just getting through the day. Katerina, help keep focus on bigger picture goals. Excellent. Good stuff. Thank you, Ed and Katerina and everybody for chatting in there. Appreciate that. Very nice. Now I'm seeing a good chat in there. Good stuff. Yes, excellent. Oh, very nice. Willpower. I like it. I must have been behind on reading my chats. I'm seeing a lot of them in there now. Thank you, folks, for participating. I appreciate that. Very nice, Randy. I appreciate that thought, man. Very, very deep, as you always are, Mr. Perdue. I appreciate that, sir. Wow, Susan, good thought. I think that speaks for most of us. Yep. We have to, you know, if that tree falls in our path, we have to be able to know a way around. We have to have thought about that as well prior to that happening. Because if we're ready for it, we're going to be much more likely to be able to succeed. Great comment, Susan. You're absolutely right. And you know, one of the things that I talked with the staff at NIC about as well with this program, Susan's comment is, it's what we constantly teach inmates. If their way is blocked, how else can they get to it? I think this program would be very, very adaptable to our offender population as well. So that's something to think about as we go through this as well. Great chat. I appreciate that, folks. Thank you. I'll try to keep up with the chat. Here's one of the activities. Let me go back. One of the activities that we do, and we're not going to do this activity today, but one of the very first activities that we do, and we'll talk about this a little more in depth later, is in the pre-session assignment that we give students. We ask them to think about the very last difficult situation they faced at work, and we asked them to ask, when that happened, once you were alerted to that situation, how did you think about it, and how did you address it? That kind of thing. We like to ask that to participants to get them thinking about the way they address situations. Do they use their willpower? Do they use their way power? And then we talk about that during the first session. So that's one of the activities we use for hope and to emphasize to participants throughout the 3-session webinar on psychological capital how important to actually set goals and to use that willpower and way power. The second component we'll talk about a little more in depth is efficacy. And this is our individual conviction or confidence to mobilize our motivation, our cognitive resources, and our courses of action. How self-confident are we to succeed? And that's how we define efficacy. And here's another question, and this is the way we begin to discuss efficacy with the students in this program is, in your role at work, what specific task? We ask them, do they perform daily? And we ask them to prioritize those top 3 to 4 tasks that are actually critical to their success. And what we do is we ask them to rate them, and then we talk about in the group activity, the next slide, how confident are you to do the following with those tasks? At least get by. Comment about having a light bulb moment, because your willpower does have to be paired with the way power. Good comment, Katerina. I appreciate that. Here are some, and something we share with our participants, this self-efficacious people. Here's some of the characteristics of the folks that have high self-efficacy. We should focus on tough tasks and set high goals. We should welcome a challenge. We should be highly motivated. We should invest effort to accomplish those goals that we've set. And then we should also show perseverance. So those are some of the characteristics that we share with our participants, and we try to build self-efficacy in our folks as we go through this 3-part webinar that we do with our staff. Resiliency, the third component of psychological capital. And we like to say this is definitely a developable, easy for me to say, capacity. And I sure hope it is, because doggone it, it seems like we get knocked down all the time, especially in our professions. So it is something that we should continue to develop. Some characteristics of being resilient. Some things that we need to work on, and things we strive to work on throughout this program, is we need to make realistic plans. We need to have a positive view of ourselves. It's very important. We need to be confident in our strengths. We need to work on and build our skills in communication and problem solving. And then we need to have that capacity to manage strong feelings and impulses. Really like your comment, Stuart. You're absolutely right. Even with all these other things, you do things right, you have goals, and I think you make a great comment, Stuart. You have those goals, you do things, but then you get knocked down. Things don't go the right way. But that's why it's so important to have that way power as well, have those alternative paths, and be resilient. You're absolutely right. Great comment, Stuart. And here's a question for you. I'd like for you to chat in the box, if you would, please. Why is resiliency so important in the environments that we work in corrections? Why do you think resiliency is so important? Give you just a few moments to chat something in the box, and we'll talk about some of those comments. Is the audio back on, Michael? Not as
can turn them on individually.
Training is the reason we preach that so much is because it is so hard to be resilient in the corrections environment. So many things happen on a day-to-day basis. I'll give you all just a minute to read those chats, and please do that, because those chats are very, very vital and very important to us understanding psychological capital. Great comments, folks. I appreciate it. Great comment, Ed. Thank you, Rosalie. Appreciate your comment. Probably put him back on mute, Michael, if you haven't already.
I've pinpointed where that sound's coming from, so I think everybody else is okay.
Okay, great. Great comment, Trish. Great comment. Thank you. Appreciate that. Alicia, great comment. Appreciate it. Thank you, folks, for those comments. And that just really illustrates my point. As much feedback as we're getting on how tough it is to be resilient, why it is so important in a corrections environment for us to be resilient if we're going to be successful. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. The last component of psychological capital we focus on during the training is optimism. And as we talk about optimism, we say realistic and flexible optimism. I think that particularly relevant when we talk about optimism is flexible optimism, which equips us leaders and us as employees with the ability to discern when to use optimistic versus pessimistic responses to things. Because sometimes it's easy for us as corrections professionals to go to the pessimistic side. We see things on a daily basis. So what's the difference between optimism and pessimism? Let me hear some responses in the chat box on that in regards to what you folks think before I give my definition of that. Optimism versus, and what is really the difference between optimism and pessimism? We discussed during this program how important it is. As I'm waiting for your responses to come in, I'll talk about what we say about it throughout the program. Is optimism is those folks that really look as the glass being, full or more than half full versus half empty. It's half full, not half empty. You look at the positive aspects of things when you're optimistic versus pessimistic. I like that, Katerina. Pragmatism, being a pragmatist. Yes, that's a very good comment. Very good comment. You just take things as they come. Great comment, Susan. Great comment. Great comments coming in. Really appreciate that. India, that's an excellent comment. Excellent comment. I couldn't have said it better myself. And if you folks can't see that, pessimism is a negative view of corrections, and optimism is finding solutions to the problems. So that's a great way to look at things. I appreciate that. And one of the themes of this program is we talk about, using that realistic optimism. We can't be the unrealistic optimist. We have to be a realistic, whereas Katerina used the term pragmatist as well, being pragmatic about it. So that's great. Those are great comments that are coming in. And that's really key to build on that and have an understanding of what that realistic and flexible optimism is that we work towards throughout this program. So thank you for those comments. I appreciate it. The next thing that we'll talk about is developing psychological capital and how we do that throughout this program. And once again, I realize I'm not getting real deep into any of the things that we're talking about here today because we're not going to have the time to do the activities and the discussion and all the things. But I want to give you an understanding of how we develop psychological capital during this program. The first thing we do is we work with the participants of this program to develop goals and paths to goal design. And hope can be developed by generating those work-related goals that are valuable and reasonably challenging to us. That's what we encourage folks to do. And also, these goals should include a clear beginning and end point. We go over goal setting. Here again, I'm reading the chat boxes. Stuart, that's a great one. That's a great one. If you folks aren't reading the chat over there, please do so. It's great stuff. Another great comment, Randy. Good stuff. And, you know, Trish just asked me a question. I appreciate that, Trish. The way we started it here in Missouri with this course is we actually did start with our managers, yes. And then we have not made it down to line staff yet, but we are working our way down to our line staff. But right now we're still delivering it to our managers and supervisors, yes. So that's a great question, Trish. Let's hope. That's what we do, and it's important, you know, that and we share with our staff as they're developing positive psychological capital. We share with them it's important to discuss their goals and plans with others so that they can learn from others' perspectives. It's something we call borrowing perspective, and we encourage folks to do that. And we actually ask them throughout the course of the activities they do in this program to actually send in the perspective of other folks that they've given them on their goals and their development. And also, it's very important to think about overcoming those obstacles as well. And we make sure that they think about obstacles as they're developing their goals. So that's hope. The second thing, realistic optimism, as we've talked about. We make sure that through the hope development phase that they become more confident and can identify those obstacles and plans to overcome those obstacles. So they have to look at things very, to borrow Katerina's phrase, very pragmatically. And then also, once again, you know, we want them also to get feedback from others about achieving goals and overcoming obstacles, those type of things, which really leads us next to efficacy. And one of the things we really want to share with them, and I always do and make sure they have within their goal setting when they're developing this psychological capital outline, if you will, is we make sure that they have sub-goals that they have set so that they can start experiencing some success, and then modeling for others that they're actually succeeding. So that's an important aspect of the program as well, is that they actually have some sub-goals that they can actually achieve and actually build that self-confidence within themselves. And then the fourth component of HERO, our acronym that we haven't talked about yet, is resiliency along this. And that really builds in all aspects of these three components. Is we have to have resiliency, building an awareness in ourselves of our talents, our skills, our social networks. That's something we really instill in our employees as well, to make sure they use those, their own talents and skills, and also social networks, and then work with others to check in to see what assets that they have that might be able to use, that kind of thing. And all of that leads us to, hopefully, the outcome, which is sustainable, verifiable performance with impact. And that's the goal at the end of the program, is that they can actually attain and achieve their goal, and it can be something that's very achievable and measurable as well throughout this program that we deliver on psychological capital. What questions do you have on that model? Any questions, comments, thoughts? Very nice, Stuart. Great comment. Appreciate it. Growth mindset. Very nice, Stuart. Good stuff. Here are some of the, let's discuss some of the exercises that we use to build psychological capital. The exercises that we use, actually we use that acronym HERO, and we develop psychological capital by, here's how we do that, by we really work with the folks in the very first session on how they accurately frame adverse events. And we really want them think about things that have happened to them in the past that either went well or didn't go so well. So that's what we want them to think about and use those events to learn from, and also then start leveraging personal resources. What we want them to start thinking about, which in corrections sometimes all too often I think we don't realize there are things we can leverage, things we can use that will assist us. We're not just on an island out there. We are part of a team. We have things, resources that we can leverage. And then we also, we in all these exercises that we do throughout the course of the 3-series webinar is we encourage them to set those goals. And that really culminates in the last webinar, it culminates in them actually setting that goal and really achieving some of those sub goals already, so we can actually measure some of their success. Like your comment, Alicia, thank you. Yes, good model to use to develop a positive culture. Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Thank you for that comment. And then we also work with them through all these exercises to ensure that they are identifying multiple pathways to success. We challenge the participants as they build these goal-setting diagrams to look for multiple ways that they can succeed. So we really want to challenge them to not just say, I've got to go from A to Z this way. Think about other ways rather than taking a straight line. What's going to happen if things get in the way? So we really challenge them to do that, and really, as we've discussed, by identifying those obstacles. So that's a very important piece as well. What questions do you have? Another thing that we really strongly emphasize, and you folks should know this very well coming from a corrections background, adversity is going to happen. You're certain to be faced with adversity. So here's the thing that we ask them to do is to frame the issue and then think about those risks that they are going to, things that will happen to them along the way. So we ask them to calculate that risk, and then what is that risk? How do they minimize the risk? What control do they have? And what are their options? So as they're building this goal setting framework throughout this Iactp program, that we ask them to think about all these things that as they're achieving this goal, what could be at risk? How can they minimize that? And then once again, like we discussed earlier, what control they have and other options they can take. So all these things that we discuss, we weave throughout all that, the factor that they're going to face adversity and they have to be ready for it. You know, I use an analogy when I when I first started teaching this program about, I asked folks about in a corrections environment, and I use the analogy of offenders coming to mainline in the dining room, and you as the dining room sergeant, for example, observing offender behavior. You're not just, most of us that have worked in corrections for a long time are not just observing offender behavior in the dining room. What you're doing as you're standing there watching things is you're thinking about, what would I do if this happened? If an offender over here at this side of the dining room does this, what are my actions? Where are my exits? Where are my supporting staff members that I can use in that situation? So those are the kind of things that we ask folks to do. So that's just an example of how we get them thinking about how they should frame these things and also be ready for that adversity when it happens. Katarina just posted a question, and let me read their question. Is this intended to be a one-time training program? Is there future work follow-up to revisit or develop further from the original goals and such? You know, Katarina, that is a great question. And right now, the way we have done it here in Missouri, it is a one-time program that we actually follow up on that one goal, but we don't follow up past that. So I guess my answer to you would be, it can really be whatever you want it to be. Right now, the way we've done it here in Missouri, it's a one-time. We actually follow through on the one goal that they do, and they've actually developed. But this actually could be expanded upon as well. Good thought, Stuart. It could be blended with a mentoring program. Good thought. Here, back again, are some examples of our Iactp exercises I talked about earlier. And once again, we ask them to identify a recent adverse situation and as concisely as possible, describe it. Think critically about their response. And we actually, during the activities, we actually ask them to talk about that and to give us some thoughts on whether or not they thought they handled it in the best way possible, how they could have done it better. We ask them to frame that issue in terms of the impact, control, and other options that they might have had. And we ask them, even if the situation went very, very well, according to them, we ask them to alternatively look at that and think about the things they could have done differently, perhaps. And then we also ask them to talk about that issue with someone else and borrow perception, because oftentimes when we share things with other folks about a critical incident that took place, something that happened, other folks might be able to give us some really good insight as to what they think about it. And we also ask them to, there we go, that's better. Sorry about that. We also ask them to record insights and discoveries, and we discuss that throughout the session. It really gives them some information about how to deal with things in the future. And it's very eye-opening for staff as they go through this as well. More examples. We want them to think back to that situation and then think critically about resources. And here's what we're really about resources. Oftentimes, especially in corrections, many staff members that I've dealt with in the past as well, anyway, we really don't look at the resources that we have available to us and don't use them appropriately. So we really want them to think about how they can what other resources they can engage, how could they have better responded the next time. And then here again, this issue of borrowing perception, which I think is pretty important as well. And once again, they record insights and discoveries. And this is actually the activity that's done in between sessions sessions 1 and 2 in the 3-part webinar series that we do. What questions do you have? I'm gonna ask a question of you folks here, and just want you to type in some responses. Why do you think it's so important that we borrow perception from others in a correctional environment? Why do you think that would be important for us to really talk to our staff about that? Type in some responses. Yes, Susan, absolutely. I'll answer your question. We actually have a 3-part, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, about the way we have it. And I'll actually share with any of you that want it to send me an email. I'll share with you our curriculum for the 3-part webinar series. So that's that, yes. Alicia, yeah, absolutely. Generate more ideas. Wow, Ed, right on the money. Our perceptions oftentimes, we're biased towards ourselves oftentimes, aren't we? Great comment, Ed. It's so good to be able to look at others' perspectives and how they might have viewed that situation a little differently. It's really difficult as staff go through this training. What we've seen as we've delivered it, it's really difficult for folks, and it's really can get emotional with folks as well, to admit, wow, I thought I handled that very well, but I really could have done a better job by doing ABC versus XYZ. So it really has been eye-opening for staff as they go through these activities and do these things. Human ability for self-deception is unequaled. Wow, that's pretty powerful stuff there, Stuart. Good stuff. Rosalie, our perceptions are our reality. You're so right. Thank you, Tammy. I appreciate that thought as well. Absolutely. Try to understand why someone sees things differently. Yep, absolutely, Tammy. Thank you. Appreciate that. So those are some examples of the exercises we use. And one of the things that we constantly reinforce as we're going through here is that we need to leverage and use our personal resources. We always ask our staff as they're going through these activities, what personal resources do I have that can assist me, can help me? What skills can I leverage? And how can I efficiently obtain those skills needed? So one of the things we want folks to do is reach out as they build that positive psychological capital. We want them to enhance those personal networks and use the resources they have. And that will assist us and all of us in building our psychological capital. And we also ask staff to take ownership. This is one of the final things that we always share with our folks, that we must be responsible for our own success and that we must own our pursuit towards that success. And one of the big things, that last bullet that just popped up on your screen, is that we must envision our success. And that's something that we spend quite a bit of time on as we talk to folks as they go through this positive psychological capital, is that we really need the folks that are building these goals and setting this framework, unless we can see ourselves succeeding in a situation, we're probably not going to succeed. It's through those visions that we accomplish things. And the example I use is a few years back, my daughter and I, she challenged me. She said, "Dad, we're not spending enough time together." She challenged me with running a half marathon with her. And one of the things that her and I both did throughout the course of the training, we trained about 4 months for that. We actually envisioned ourselves crossing that finish line together and being successful running that half marathon. And I think it's important that we share that with our staff, that they're positive and they do actually envision that success. And we got to be responsible for our own success because nobody else is going to do it for us. We have to help ourselves. And it worked out well, by the way. We finished the marathon together and very successful. So it was good stuff. So that's very important that we share that with our staff in their efforts to build positive psychological capital. And Susan, you asked the question earlier about, is this something we deliver to our staff? And yes, it is. And as I mentioned earlier, the first part of the program, some of you may have been late signing on. But as I mentioned, the very first of the program, this psychological capital training actually was developed by the National Institute of Corrections. I assisted the National Institute of Corrections, Dr. John Eggers at NIC, with developing this, and we trained it. We actually trained a pilot program to our functional unit managers, a control group here in Missouri, and also a group of our district administrators for our probation and parole division. And we did that, and it was very successful. It worked very well. And then I trained it with NIC as well to a couple of other states. Now, and I say we did a control group. We never really did, because one of the things that happened is that John retired from NIC prior to us actually measuring the data and doing the things we needed to do with Iactp here in Missouri. What I have done since that point in time, because I don't have the support of NIC anymore, we have developed our very own program here in Missouri, and we are just now starting to measure some of the data. I do have some anecdotal information I can share about from Missouri about staff that, they've actually used personal goals that they've set with our Iactp program in regards to losing weight and running. Another individual just recently went through our program, ran a marathon and completed it, and he used the Iactp goal setting method. Had another staff member at a work site that had some goals of dealing with their staff that worked out very well in regards to time and attendance. So I have some anecdotal information, but nothing real set in stone. So that's the way the program is designed right now. And the way it started, as I said, started with NIC. I've taken it here in Missouri, and we use Adobe Connect as our platform that we teach our virtual instructor-led program. We have a pre-session assignment we send to all the participants. We we limit it to 15 participants per session. We send them a pre-session assignment. They work on it, and that assignment is really that adverse situation, and we have them bring that to the first session with them. And then what they do in the first session, the first 2-hour session, is we discuss that adverse, and we discuss the 4 components of Iactp, how those 4 components, if we build positive psychological capital, they can assist folks in dealing with those adverse situations. Then we give them another homework assignment in between sessions 1 and 2. We have them actually think critically about how they're going to deal with situations in the future, and then to borrow perception from folks as well. So that's the intersession assignment. That's the homework assignment. And then we do the second 2-hour session, and then we discuss more about building positive psychological capital. We talk about adversity, overcoming adversity. We talk about willpower, way power, goal setting, a little more in depth. And then we give them their next homework assignment, which is their final assignment, and that is their goal development. And we ask them to actually outline how they're going to achieve that goal. And we actually, during the third session, the final 2-hour session, we listen to how they have achieved their goals, how they have began to achieve their goals, and then we follow up after the third session with them. So that is the actual Iactp webinar design that we use here in Missouri. What questions do you have? And please feel free, if you have a question and you'd like to verbalize it, just type a Q in the box and we'll get Michael to try to unmute you and see how that works. So please do that at this time if you have a question for us. Great comment, Randy. I appreciate that. Good stuff. Any questions? Not seeing anything in the chat box right now. So some closing thoughts, things I want to leave you with. And if you want to chat some things in, when could you use psychological capital? Type it in. I want you to think about this. Who would be a good target audience? Hey, Ken, great question. Our target audience right now are mid-level managers down here. That's who we're starting with. Hey, Michael, would you unmute Randy Purdue, please, for a question?
Yeah, Randy, you should be able to go ahead.
Go ahead, Randy. Can you hear me, Randy?
It actually doesn't look like Randy's connected by audio.
Maybe not. Okay, thank you. Trish's questions. Yeah, absolutely, Trish. No classroom whatsoever. It's all done. We send out the homework assignment, the pre-session assignment. They complete that. Then they come up to the first webinar session on Adobe Connect. Then we give them another homework assignment. Everything is done on webinar. Yeah, absolutely. Susan, another great question. They do not complete the program unless they complete the work. Absolutely. Yes. And the last 2 sessions we've done, we've had all 15 complete. Yep. I want you to think about this last question as well. What impact could this have? Susan, what they do is they actually submit it electronically to us. Yes. That's another great question. They submit it electronically, and they have to do that. We give them a deadline before the third session to make sure that that we have their homework assignments in. Yep. Good questions. Good questions. And Ed asked the question, limit per class. Yes, Ed, 15 per class. Yep. Ken asked a question about return on investment. Ken, it's really early. A lot of anecdotal information, just very, brief kind of stuff that folks really like it, but we've really not measured it as much as we should. Great comment, Susan. Appreciate it. You're right. Way power is very significant. You're right. I sent you my contact or put my contact information on the screen. That's my phone number. Feel free to call me or email me. I will be glad to send you the curriculum. We have it, the slideshows that we use online using Adobe Connect. Once again, you would have to have a platform to use it electronically, or you could turn it into a classroom module if you'd like to. But I think, personally, I think it works much better being trained virtually. What other questions do you have? Thank you, Susan. Good comment. You're right, Susan. Absolutely. I want to share with you also that Michael, as I said, our association services manager, and he's a producer today, is going to be sending you an evaluation. He actually is going to be, or excuse me, they're going to be sending it to you. He's going to be posting it on our website. I want you to go on our website, please, and actually fill out that evaluation in Constant Contact. We'd really like to hear what you have to say about the webinar today. And he also will be sending you a certificate of attendance. Michael, anything else you want to say about that?
Actually, when I send you the certificate of attendance, I will include the link to the evaluation survey just to make it simple. So you can just
Excellent.
link
You,
directly from that email. If anybody,
hey, Jim,
if anyone has extra people in your office watching the webinar and they would like the certificate, just email me their names and I'll get one out to them also.
Thank you, Michael. Randy, did I hear you?
Yes, can you hear me now?
I got you now, Randy. What's up?
Okay, well, I was on the road trying to manipulate two phones so I could make this work. I heard someone mention outcomes or return on investment. I guess what is it that entices those to go? I mean, is there an end in mind of their attitude changing, or what is it that they feel that they're going to receive from this to better themselves as correctional employees?
Yeah, that's a great question, Randy. And something we've done, and Susan, mentioned earlier in some of the chat as well. We really don't have any rock solid evidence on whether or not this is being effective or not for us here. Now, one of the things we've tied it to here in Missouri is we have a leadership development program, and one of the things we've said we want them to do is to attend psychological capital development prior to being selected for that leadership development program. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's one of the things we've done. Yeah.
Well, I think it goes back to the most simplest way. People don't know what they don't know, and that is, and I say that to say this, that they don't realize steps that can actually give them that fulfillment and that, the processes that you're doing. And I guess I'm looking at a model of having that, and I know Katerina and that program that she has, from corrections fatigue to fulfillment has been an impact. But in this, I can see where there's steps that will help them, but knowing the ultimate goal of what they're trying to achieve, I think is I guess what I'm looking at. What where is that? How is that going to, or do they even care? Because there's a lot of research is that it's about 70% of the workforce are in jobs they really don't want to be in because they're not really working from their strength. But I don't mean to ramble, but you understand where I'm coming from. How do they feel that they can benefit as a person and in their career by going through this? Is the question I pose.
But and no, Randy, that's a great question. And Ed just typed in, and that's what I was getting ready to say. It's the whip 'em aspect. What's in it for me kind of thing. Right. I couldn't agree with you more. And one of the things that we and I don't know if we do a really good job of this up front in the objectives. And once again, I'll send the curriculum out to anybody. But we talk about how psychological capital is about who we are, but the reality is it's about who we can become. And that's what we stress to the employees that attend this class or want to attend. It's really about who you can become, how you can become a better employee, how you can set goals better, how you can do all those things better, which makes us better as individuals. So it's really kind of nebulous, but it's really about how we can become our better selves. Does that make sense to you, Randy?
Oh no, it makes perfect sense. But and I guess trying to sell it to the mindset of those that might have that sense of apathy, they're just wanting a paycheck. That's probably the hardest audience to hit, is those who just, hey, I'm getting paid, that's all I'm worried about.
Yeah.
but it's just like you were relating to the the efficacy, and it's kind of like, and I was thinking about this, and it all plays into your self-esteem and self-efficacy is really two sides of the same coin, because the better you do, the better you feel about yourself. The better you feel about yourself, the better you do. So, and I guess to get that message across to them is what is paramount,
You are so right on, Randy, and I wish we could continue this conversation. Thank you very much for adding that. I do know we're over our time.
Yeah, okay, I like to get that, Jim, instead of emailing you, but you remember, I like to get that, the slides and stuff.
I'll send it to you, Randy, and we're actually going to post. Yeah, we're actually going to post all these slides that I had today. I'm going to post them on the Iactp website for all you folks, and then I will also send the curriculum to any of you folks, like you just mentioned, Randy. I'll send it to you. I'll send you the actual curriculum, and Ed, I got your message as well, so I'll send that out. I want to give you some closing thoughts in regards to, and just to kind of pump you up a little bit about the future. Thanks for working with us on this webinar. I know we had a lot of bumps in the road, things that didn't go quite right, could have better audio, that kind of stuff. We're going to work on that. We've got a series of webinars coming up, May 16th, Classroom Control in the Digital Environment. I've seen the curriculum on that. It's going to be great. David Nelson is a guy that works for us here in Missouri. He's going to deliver that. It's going to be great. So please share that with your friends. Also, the wonderful Randy Perdue, who you just heard from, September 11th is going to be talking about living beyond your comfort zone. And that's going to be a great webinar he's going to do for us. And also, we heard about Katerina Spinaris earlier. Katerina Spinaris is going to be delivering a webinar on correctional staff wellness December 12th. So please join us for all those webinars. This was the start. Once again, thanks for bearing with us on all the bumps in the road and all that kind of jazz. And if you have feedback for me, send me a personal email. Tell me I stunk it up or whatever the case may be. I'm always looking for that kind of stuff. So thank you folks very much for participating. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Thank you folks. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
You bet. Thanks, Trish. Bye.
Bye.
Still there, Michael?
Yep, I'm here.
Good. Anything else I need to do? Anything else we need to talk about?
Nope, I've got my email ready to send out. Got the certificates made up, so survey is ready and constant contact. So
good. Thank you. Hey, thank you for your help. I don't know what do you think the audio issue was?
I couldn't figure out other than it was coming from Trish's connection, but I'm not sure how or why.
I'll be darned. Huh.
She, at least on my screen, I was showing her being signed on twice. Her name was on the attendee box, so I don't know if there was some feedback in her office that
was weird.
Maybe she had a microphone on her computer and was connected by the phone, perhaps.
Maybe so. Yeah, it sounded like she was. It's exactly right, because she was trying to dial in, but she was already had audio going on her computer.
Yeah,
because you could hear that thing going on. Well, I tried to deal with it as best as I could. Hopefully that worked okay. Do you think it worked?
No, I think it worked fine.
Just
I'll keep it in mind for the future.
Yeah, I thought I rambled a little too much.
No, I thought it went well. People had good questions and a lot more chat box interaction than the December webinar. So,
well, I thought there was a lot of good chat box stuff. That was good. I really did think that was good. Yeah,
people were engaged in the content.
It seemed like it.
So
it really seemed like it. Yeah. Let's keep working with it. I think how many folks were signed on, Michael? Total.